Hello everyone and welcome to Dragonston. This time I bring the theory that I have always found very curious and interesting to analyze, and that's why I have investigated thoroughly. This theory is trying to prove that Kanto suffered a great war in the events prior to the first generation of Pokemon, that is, before Red begins its adventure in Kanto, and there are several proofs and facts, more than I thought, and as I will explain below, which indicate that I'm sure this could have happened. Regarding how this war developed and arose, it could have been for many reasons. It is spoken of a possible civil war, a war against Jeddah for territorial reasons, or even between legendary Pokemon or criminal organizations, but the more accepted possibility and to where the proofs are directed, as I will say in the video, is a war between Kanto and Neva. Done the introduction of this theory, let us mention all the facts, evidence and arguments that make this theory quite reasonable, to give at the end of the video my personal opinion about this. With respect to these proofs and observations, in order to prove this theory, I will divide them into 12 different points so that they are ordered and separated from each other. Without further ceremonies, let's begin. First, a war in Pokemon is nothing new, or the first time that occurs. We have a record and constancy that there were Pokemon wars in the past, such as the War of Kalos 3,000 years ago that almost made it disappear this region due to the ultimate weapon. Neva also entered in a civil war 400 years ago, reason that probably caused the division of the original dragon in Reshiram and Zekrom, representing each the ideals of each side. In the same way, in the Pokemon film of Lucario and the Mystery of Mew, we are told about another war that happened 450 years ago and that precisely affected the northern part of Kanto. Second, this is the classic argument used for this theory, and is that the Lieutenant Surge, third gym leader of electric-type Pokemon in Vermilion City, tells us about a relatively recent war. Textually and as we show on the screen, Surge tells us that electric Pokemon saved him in combat, paralyzing his enemies. In Pokemon Blue, the original version, he says this again as I show on screen. This is confirmed with one of his disciples, who tells us that the Lieutenant Surge was very strict during the war. Against this, you can say that a couple of testimonies talking about a war are not enough to confirm it, being Vermilion City the only place where we hear about this supposed war, one that never again throughout your adventure you hear nothing more of this. However, the war and its victims is not a very nice theme to talk about, unless if your region ended up being defeated, as I will say next. Third, and linked with the previous point, as I said at the beginning, this war is very likely to be between Kanto and Neva. We know that Kanto was inspired in Japan, specifically in the region of Honshu, and Neva is inspired in the United States, specifically in New York, said by Junichi Masuda. And we see here that this could be a wink to the Second World War, where the United States and Japan faced each other, winning the United States. This theory is reinforced by the fact that the Lieutenant Surge is known as the American Lightning, in addition to mentioned in Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green and the daily Pokemon that lived in the United States, being confirmed in Pokemon Black and White too, where it said that is originally from Tesselia, inspired in New York. And, what do I mean by this? Simply that the lieutenant probably have been sent to Kanto, which would be Japan, in the middle of the war, with the aim of defeating it, and once the battle was won, as the United States won in reality, he stayed there as a gym leader, explaining also because he is the only one who mentions it due to he is the one who emerged victorious. And you will tell me why there is no atmosphere of tension and slavery in the region by Tesselia. Well, if we look at history, General MacArthur could be considered the Lieutenant Surge, having a very similar history, and being American and a high military position, was sent to Japan at the end of World War II with the objective to direct it, and he didn't eliminate the culture and way of living of that country, as well as he didn't get into the emperor figure and make good democratic changes in the country. So passing this to Kanto, seeing this region that the way of life will be the same, there is no talk of it being something for the whole region. Another possibility, although after this most improbable, is that Neva and Kanto were united in front of another region and the Lieutenant Surge has been sent as an ally. Fourth, Kanto was the only region that does not have a league champion. This is very curious, since all the later regions, including the 3 years later Kanto, have a characteristic champion, and the Pokemon League, by definition, consists of 4 members, the classical Elite Four, and a champion. However, in the events of Red and Blue, that square is vacant. This could be related to war. The former champion, being the most powerful trainer in the region, would do everything possible so that his region wasn't conquered, being his effort useless and falling in combat, without giving time to a new champion take his place, so the theory of the Kanto War would serve to explain why there is no final champion in Kanto. To finish this point, in case you thought that your opponent could have beaten the previous champion of the league, and already appear directly as a recent new champion, the same Lance after defeating him confirms this as we show on screen that we could have become champions after defeating him, but that your opponent beat him before becoming automatically champion. Fifth, Professor Oak and Pokédex. It is very strange that Professor Oak, a person dedicated to the Pokemon throughout his life, knows only 150 Pokemon, and that in the Pokédex that gives to us does not have the data of a single Pokemon. This could explain why during the war it was not possible to leave practically Opal town, much less of Kanto being able to know only the Pokemon of this region. And as far as Pokédex, it is very possible that the saved data of the few registered Pokemon have been lost after the war. You can tell me that in all regions we receive an empty Pokédex. However, there is a big difference in the form and reason why we received it in Kanto and in the rest of regions. In Kanto, that Professor Oak gives us almost like an obligation to find all Pokemon and analyze them for him, being contradictory that he no longer had cataloged them if he wanted to do it so much, while in other regions it's given as a compliment to our adventure, a way in which we can improve and learn by our means. Understood that it's empty, so that we go filling the gaps and learning well, far from that almost supplication that the Professor Oak makes us giving us the Pokédex. Furthermore, curiously it's 3 years later, when the war situation already has stabilized, when we see Professor Oak around Jeddah in Mr. Pokmon's house and participating in the Golden Obsidia radio program. It is very curious that just 3 years later he knows the existence of all these new Pokemon, when in Kanto preached that there were only 150. It is true that the region of Jeddah was created after the Kanto region, but it is still strange that knowing this the creators put it next to Kanto, if they knew that it would not make sense that suddenly a region of 2 kilometers had 100 new species. In case of a great war that lasted in time, Professor Oak and the rest of the region would have been so isolated that they will not be able to know the existence of these new Pokemon, to hardly be able to contact with Jeddah. 6th. Kanto was the Pokemon region with less recreational spaces of all. The unique place of leisure is a casino in Celadon City and is taken by Team Rocket, while the rest of regions had leisure facilities in Jeddah as a legal casino, a radio tower, florists or a dance theater, in addition to a lighthouse, something that does not even have Kanto in Vermilion City, and is a legal casino as well, a space station and several museums. For example, we could continue with each region adding more things, and if we get to Neva, this is very casually the most developed of all. Being the antithesis of Kanto, this region seriously seems made by multimillionaires. Numerous giant bridges, some architectural prowess such as the seated bridge that opens to cruise luxurious cruises, porcelain city with immense skyscrapers, soccer and basketball courts, an amusement park, a Hollywood movie studio, etc., as the winner of this war obtained all the resources of the region defeated. On the other hand, we find that Kanto has places like the Lavender Tower, an immense cemetery, and casually it is also 3 years later when it is modernized a little more by building a radio tower and a train station, perhaps because our passage red was still in the post-war period. Against this you can say that is the first region and didn't give the graphics to do so many things. However, if they could make a casino, that large 6-story cemetery or the huge Silk building, which is a private company and does not count as a recreational place, a simple lighthouse, a radio tower instead of the cemetery, or a mere theater could also do so, there's no excuse. 7th. Red Time Kanto seems to be a region in a clear post-war scenery. This is mainly seen in 2 aspects. First of all, the large number of Pokemon centers that it has, even in remote places that are neither cities or towns, as next to the Mount Moon and the Rock Tunnel. In fact, one of these centers, Pokemon, the one of the Mount Moon, even disappears 3 years later in our passage like gold, perhaps for not being necessary yet, being able to be these places strategic points during the war. The second fact is the existence of the undergrounds in the first editions, with 2 in the region, and mysteriously also closed 3 years later, claiming that bikers caused problems, when a clear function of these undergrounds is to serve as shelters and hiding places during the war. 3 years later, having finished this, lost its main function and were closed. This is in line with what is said in point 6, all changes that Kanto has in 3 years seem to be typical changes of a country when leaving a war. 8th. In this case, some beta designs of the first editions of Pokemon, made by Game Freak artist Ken Sugimori, showed sketch of beta gym leaders, and to our surprise Blaine, the leader of Cinnabar Island, appeared somewhat younger and yes, in a military uniform. Joining to the Lieutenant Surge, there would be 2 gym leaders related to the army. Quite curious. In addition to that, in Pokemon Red and Blue, Sabrina appeared with a whip and a garment that could be related also to the army. Very interesting and continues reinforcing this theory. 9th. I do not see this argument as important, but worthy of mention, and is that the appearance of the TMS can be linked to this war, being very unnatural instruments and allow Pokemon quickly learn powerful moves that would be useful on the battlefield. In addition to the Celadon Martin Casino are full of TMS, and at a low price compared to other regions. Some of them even don't sell MTS, and if they do have exorbitant prices like the Rockavello City Casino and Senna. Being able to explain this, because they were created in Kanto like a war appeal and later were extended to other regions, but with a greater price to be characteristic of the first region of Pokemon. In addition, Neva, the enemy of Kanto in the war, curiously is the first region that included an unlimited use of TMS, being able to use them as many times as we want. Perhaps this technology gave him advantage over Kanto. 10th. The SS.Anne. Unlike the other regions, the port of Vermilion City at that time only has a boat, and this boat would just take passengers did not return in a year, as an old man says in the city, as if that was an undesirable region and people emigrate from it after being in ruins after the war. And, 3 years later, its one includes more ships and destinations, contacting Jeddah, for example. 11. Throughout the region, the immense majority of characters are or children's, or women's or ancients, and the few adult characters that we find are gym leaders, the Elite Four, police, electricians and criminals as the Team Rocket and the bikers of the cycling road, and with 10 years they repeat that you are already a man and you have to undertake your adventure. Well, like finding children like you and girls of your age in the middle of a dark cave without their parents is the order of the day in Kanto. The adult male population, which must go to war, would have mostly succumbed, leaving only the powerful trainers and deserters like Team Rocket, being the members of the Elite Four, clearly the characters that more adults look in the game. 12th and last, you don't have father in the game. Relating to the previous point, you and your rival lack a father, being able that they fall in the war. Usually this argument is not valid because we never have father in the games, but you will see that watching it carefully. In Pokemon Silver and Gold you don't have father, but your rival Silver has, and is none other than Giovanni. In Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire your father is the leader of Petal City Gym, and one of your rival Wally also has father. In Pokemon Diamond and Pearl your rival also has father. The Tower Tycoon Palmer dotting Pokemon Black and White also your rival Bell has father. In fact, it is seen how he denied Bell starter Pokemon Adventure, quite the opposite in Kanto where you are almost forced. Well, here is the theory and all the sections that I could find and observe to support it and defend it. Now I will give my opinion about all of this and say whether or not I believe that there was a war in Kanto shortly before it began its adventure. Of course, it is clear that Pokemon is one of the games that more things left in the air, and in each region we can find examples of places where things are not clear, being logical the amount of theories that are made, in addition to showing Pokemon a distant image of reality. That beautiful world that they paint us at the beginning of our adventure is very different from reality, which is full of dangers and subtle, as the case of Kuban and his murdered mother, for example. They show us, but without hardly mentioning it, as if it was something that would not be interesting to show like many other cases. It would not be surprising, then, that in a very subtle way they would also make us see that there was a war in Kanto recently, and as I have explained, there is much evidence, some more solid than others, which indicate that it was so. And, in this case, if I had to choose I would say that if there was a war in Kanto, the Lieutenant's evidence is in his relationship with the United States being Kanto Japan is too much, in addition to the other proofs, although some of the Pokédex, TMS and the SS.Anne seem to me excessive, and up together of make this theory. Almost every observable detail of this region can be related to a recent war, and they put the Kanto of Red Time in a clear post-war scenery. So for me, until it is not denied, there was a war and Kanto was involved, probably against Neva. Here is the theory. I hope it has been interesting and made you reflect on this, and if you saw it before I hope my version has brought new things. You can leave in the comment box about which Pokemon theory you would like to talk about, as well as give an opinion on this and say if you think there was a war in Kanto, without saying more. See you in next videos.